pretty prestigious eastern campuses to debate the constitutionality of Obamacare in November. I was there. I went to New York City and to New Haven, Connecticut, first to Columbia University at noon, then took the train down to New Haven and went to Yale, and had 2 debates in the same day. And I made my case as to the unprecedented nature of this federal power grab. And I came across this piece of information, which, if you remember nothing else I said tonight, remember this. This is a history lesson from our elementary school. And I'm talking about 1774. So we're talking about 2 years before the Declaration. So what I'm about to share with you, I'm going to call an aboriginal principle of the American founding. And it is this. In 1774, we had the Stamp Acts. Remember, we all learned about in the primary grades as a part of the build-up to the Revolution. And coinciding with the Stamp Acts that the colonists rebelled against were what they called the Intolerable Acts. And what was the response of the American colonists to the Stamp Act and to the Intolerable Act? It was to institute a boycott of British goods. That is, we were still subjects of the king, and we said we refuse to buy British goods. That's a boycott. And so we maintained that boycott, and it irritated the mother country and the parliament. Well, at that time, the king had a legal advisor in the Anglo tradition of the great Anglo tradition of law that we inherited. The king and parliament had a legal advisor, and this legal advisor advised the king and the parliament that the American colonists were within their rights to boycott British goods, that is, to not purchase British goods. So, fast forward 234 years to last year, when an American president, a Speaker of the House, and a majority leader of the United States Senate, all of one party, ramming this through on a party line vote, claimed a power to force us to buy a product in the private marketplace that no previous president or Congress had ever asserted that power. And so they were asserting a power that the King of England did not have over us when we were his subjects. And I went on to say at Yale University, to my very distinguished opponent, that I suppose you have to go back to the pharaohs of Egypt or the sultans and the emperors of the Far East to find an absolute monarch who claimed this kind of power that they now claim over us. That is what is at stake. This is what Roy Blunt means when he calls us to recognize that the fundamental question is, what kind of people are we going to be? Are we going to be just like Belgians and Danes and Japanese and citizens of other countries and Poles? I hope not. I hope we'll stand up and be Americans, and I know you do too. I was so glad that Senator Blunt invoked American exceptionalism. You know, I had one of the greatest honors I've ever had about a month ago to speak to a new class of naturalized citizens, 18 citizens becoming Americans and standing up from 18 different countries around this globe. They've gone through all the requirements, all the study. They've been legal residents here for 5 years, and they take the oath of American citizenship. And they were from countries all over the globe, from Sri Lanka and Mexico, Central American countries, and all over Asia. And I said, you know, the great thing about American exceptionalism, I can't go to Poland and be Polish. Even though I'm of German extraction, I can't, on my father's side, I can't go to Germany and be German, much less to Japan and be Japanese. But you can all come here and be Americans. You can all be Americans. America is an empire of the mind, an empire of shared values more than territory. And that's what Roy meant. That's what our great senator meant when he invoked American exceptionalism. And all our presidents, but one, have believed unabashedly in American exceptionalism. All of them but one. And so it's all on the line. It was all on the line, and that's why Senator Blunt campaigned as hard as he did last year. Not just last year, but the year before. Just short of 2 years. And that's why some of the rest of us are in this battle. Because it's going to be all on the line next year. We began the work of yanking our country back toward an understanding of the proper role between the states and the federal government. That we have a system the founders designed of dual sovereignty, where yes, the federal government has sovereignty in certain realms, principally foreign policy, national defense, and making sure there are no barriers to interstate commerce. But states have an indispensable role too, and we are not serfs to a federal master. I think what we're involved in my constitutional challenge that is privately financed, in which I'm joined proudly by 5 citizens in Missouri who are saying enough is enough. The citizens of Missouri spoke at our primary election, passing the Healthcare Freedom Act. And no, thank you, Mrs. Pelosi. We want no part of your individual mandate on health care. Through it all, the governor of this state has been a spectator. He has been on the sidelines. Asked early on, when he had been governor about a month, and Ms. Pelosi was ramming through the stimulus bill, piling up debt, a burden on children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren yet unborn. Asked about the spending of the debt on CFM, our governor shrugged his shoulders and sort of tiredly said, well, if there's debt, our grandchildren will pay it off. Folks, that is their position. That's the stated position. That's what they have embraced. These are the stakes. We need an adult conversation and adult action, and they won't even enter the conversation, will they, Senator? Not in a serious way. They're not serious about addressing the historic challenges that we face. Asked about cap and trade. Our governor had no problem with doubling energy prices on Missourians. The stimulus, the cap and trade. Finally, he wouldn't take a position on health care through the entire 14 months of the debate that was roiling across this state. He would not take a position. And after it was passed, a member of the Capitol Press Corps finally asked him where he stood, and he shrugged his shoulders and said, well, it's now the law of the land. It's our job to implement it. Well, I guarantee you the good state legislators who are here tonight, Senator Will Krause and your other state representatives, we have them on a short leash, and they're not going to implement these plans that will take away your health care choices, not in our state while we're in office. So the man I quoted early on, I'll conclude with, and that is our 40th president, Ronald Reagan. As I said, like all presidents up to one relatively recently, he believed in American exceptionalism. Like his hero FDR, he was a Democrat. Reagan was a Democrat as a young man until middle age. And he spoke as he entered the public arena often of a shining city on a hill. Do you remember that image? And of course the image is not original with him, and he didn't claim originality. He was drawing on John Winthrop, and among the very first settlers on these then hostile and undeveloped shores from England. Refugees from religious persecution. And John Winthrop is the one who invoked and spoke about and wrote about the shining city on the hill. And of course it's biblical, of course, in its origin that he was drawing on. And Reagan said, in his valedictory address in the White House in January 1989, 22 years ago this past winter, he was leaving after 8 years, and he said, I have spoken of the shining city on the hill all my political life, but I'm not sure I ever really said what I meant when I said it. But I envisioned a tall, proud city, windswept, God blessed, and surely divinely protected. as this country has been between these two great oceans from warring powers that might do us harm. And that shining city on a hill, windswept and God-blessed and divinely inspired, had walls. If it had to have walls, there were doors that were open to anyone with the heart, the spirit, the faith, and the energy to get here honestly and legally. And he asked God's blessing on that shining city on a hill in that speech as he left his 8 years as our great president. Ladies and gentlemen, he inspired me then as he does now, and I know he does you, my fellow Republicans. It has fallen to us at this time in the great history of our country to invoke those fine images, those inspiring images, to be true to the vision of the founders and their essential guarantees of our liberty, the guarantees that the other side wants to cast aside. It's our job to hold fast to them, to go through all the tough slogging that takes, all the 900 and some odd visits that Roy Blunt made, that I'm committed to making over the next 18 months, to make sure that we pass on to children and grandchildren yet unborn this great, wonderful country of America. Thank you for being here tonight, my fellow Republicans.
Take a 5-minute break. Before we do that, I want to make sure we properly thank our two guest speakers. I will tell you that Jackson County is awful important to have